Welcome back to the Bourbon Lens with your hosts, Jake and Scott. In this week's episode, we feature Green River. You've heard about them for a long time, but now we actually get to sit down and have a conversation with them. And we're going to be talking about the brand new rye whiskey, the things they have planned for St. Patrick's Day, and much more as we dive in today. So sit back and buckle in and listen to our newest episode featuring Green River. Aaron, Distillery Operations Manager, Head Distiller. Just a fun way to say you get to play with whiskey often and also go out and talk to brands. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Absolutely. Happy to be on.
Really appreciate it. You all are, before we get into you all are in the midst of doing something really cool in Chicago right now as you get ready for St. Patrick's Day. This episode will release pretty soon after this. But, you know, as they turn the river green, might as well have Green River all over the place, right?
Yeah. We might as well throw our name in the hat as well.
Yeah. The main thing is, right, don't partake in drinking out of the river, out of Chicago. I don't think you'll like that too much, right?
Correct. That's what I'm being told by the locals.
You're going to have a real bad time if you end up drinking the Green River.
Yeah. The question is, though, have you ever drank the green beer on St. Patty's Day? I have not. I feel like I just can't do it.
There was a time in middle school or elementary school sometime where I might have made green eggs and ham, but from that experience, I won't be dyeing any food and eating it green anymore.
Yeah. Taste is pretty visual too. Mm-hmm. So it does impact perception, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It just weirds me out. And then on top of that, Stormer like sponsored by Bud Light, and no shame on Bud Light. It's a fine beer, but like, I don't need it to be unvisually pleasing because I'm kind of like it's Bud Light or whatever it is anyway. Like it's like
You're not drinking Green River bourbon on
I'm going to drink
Day.
Beer Rita. It's not going to be that.
Yeah, exactly. But anywho, I think that's an awesome way to say hello to the Chicago market. There's going to be a ton of people everywhere, and I saw Mark post some pictures on LinkedIn of where you all some signage along the river. So it'll be pretty cool experience, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's going to be some digital media out there. I think there's going to be a flyover with some bannering. We've got a couple of buses that are going to be doing whiskey samples around town. I should be on one of those, so it'll be a blast. Karen's up here; she's going to be on one as well.
Nice.
We were just at an event here at Untitled Supper Club. There was a whiskey tasting there. It was really nice, and we're trying to spread the good word for sure.
Yeah. No, that's exciting.
Say hi to our friends at Key in the Lake podcast up there in Chicago. I'm
sure they'll be out and about. There's a lot of influencers in the Chicagoland area. It's only a couple million folk.
Just a small town. So,
Aaron, we jumped in and we talked about this cool activation you have, but Owensboro is kind of tucked away, and the mothership, Bardstown Bourbon Company, probably gets a little more shine because it's sitting in bourbon country. But often in Western Kentucky is Green River, this historic DSPKY number 10, and you and your team. So can you tell us a little bit about, one, yourself and how you got into whiskey, and two, kind of what's happening in Owensboro right now?
Yeah, two loaded questions for sure. So a little bit about me. I didn't grow up in the business. I don't have a lot of family members that are distilling whiskey. I didn't learn it from my 10th grade grandfather. That's not how I got my start. It was much more get the boots laced up and go get dirty and keep your mouth shut and keep your ears open. I have an accounting degree by training, but I ended up getting into construction and demolition and a few things that got me traveling around the country. And luckily, as fate would have it, I was able to meet my wife, who was from Bardstown. And I ended up throwing whatever I had going away and going and being with her. And we ended up starting our life there in Bardstown. And I started working with Barton 1792 Distillery as a distillery supervisor there. Did that for about 3 years. So definitely got my licks in there, and then went on to help build Lux Row Distillers.
Oh, cool.
Lux Co. Did that for just about 3.5 years. Was looking for a chance to grow at that point in my career. So I didn't see that happening. So I decided to take a head distiller position with Watershed Distillery out of Columbus, Ohio. So I took that, did that for about a couple of years. I did that for almost 2 years. Within, I think, the first 6 months or so, I ended up taking over as director of operations and head distiller. So not only distilling, but working on bottling operations, shipping, control states. It's, TTB compliance, got to deal with all that. Also got to, get my feet wet in the craft world, making vodkas and gins and RTDs and Nocino and apple brandy, all kinds of fun stuff. My wife and I decided we needed to move back to Bardstown, so we started looking for options. And lo and behold, there's a few people that work at Bardstown Bourbon Company that were once Barton Distillery employees. So had some friends work there, and within a couple of weeks, I had the job here in Owensboro. So it's kind of fate would have it, really. It's worked out really well, and I couldn't be happier in my position and with the company I'm with. The company, the people, everything. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And what's that, from Bardstown to Owensboro, about 2.5 hours with the time change?
Hour and 38 minutes.
Oh, that's not bad. It's not as bad as I thought it was. Because you cut right,
Parkway.
Right across the Parkway.
Yeah, it's great coming over because you gain that hour, but going back, it can get kind of rough. You get in kind of late.
Yeah, for sure. Man,
no, it's pretty cool that you've. You kind of took like a leap of faith, changing careers and changing locations multiple times and landing here. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, when we met, I was in Montana working on a project, and then over several months, I ended up was working on a job in New Jersey, and I said, "The hell with this," and I didn't go back, so I stayed with her. But I think that was in our cards. I think that was in the cards to work out that way, and pretty happy with it. As far as Owensboro goes, Owensboro really, really has shocked me a lot. And I didn't know what to expect either. I knew Kentucky Wesleyan was over here. I knew that there was, there's a big bourbon and barbecue thing here, which is ended up being pretty big. So yeah, it's a big regional hub. There's a lot of trades that come in here from Indiana, Kentucky, Illinois. A home of the Bluegrass Hall of Fame, big convention center, big riverfront. Barbecue's just a bit big. And then you have a huge history of bourbon in this area that's been, since the 1850s or so. Now, we call ourselves the pride of Owensboro because we are the only distillery left in the region, in the area. So where once there was over 30 distilleries at one time. So there's a great amount of heritage that we take in that. And we're really happy and really proud to be the caretakers of the distillery, and really happy to be working with the people we're working with in the area.
Yeah, no, I've been really impressed with how the community has kind of embraced one another, right? Like the barbecue and the bourbon, and it seems like everyone's kind of wrapped their arms around once was this kind of weird like OZ Tyler thing, like really embraced the Green River kind of coming on full board. Yes.
And obviously that's before my time, and the juice is definitely a little bit different now with what I've tried. But it's really what when you change your focus and your core focus and your purpose, we've been able to do that quite a bit with this team.
Yeah. So one of the things that I always found interesting, so I've been to the distillery twice. Once was for the announcement of like, hey, it's going online with Scott. And the first time was actually with one of the vendor partners, right, that had come in and partnered with you all previously and or still does, buys whiskey and sets that down and kind of learned, the experience. But like the old equipment, like how do you all continue to make that more efficient, right? Because Bardstown is about innovation as a whole, the collective, pushing out clean, solid liquid. And you have this giant old still and these giant old buildings. Like how do you continue to bring efficiency with the older equipment and modernizing that?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. There's two different brands. It's two unique brands. At the core, the business function might be the same. We're still doing a lot of distilling for a lot of customers, similar to Bardstown. We're still putting juice away for our own labels, our own bottles. So similar in that focus, but we are in a position where we can be much more consistent. To deliver efficiency is kind of what we do day in, day out. Whereas BBC is really built for the transition. they can transition on the fly a lot easier with the equipment they've built in place. It's not something that I can do on the fly very well. And like you said, it's the older equipment. It wasn't built to handle so many, what are there, 50 some odd recipes at Bardstown Bourbon Company. I got 4. It's not too much.
Thank God, right?
Too difficult.
Yeah. Thank God it's only 4, right?
Yeah. So you have the traditional bourbon, right? You have the wheated, the rye, and then there's a fourth mysterious mash bill.
I might be putting away a new mash bill this year. I'm not ready to release that one yet, but we're going to put away 1,500 unique barrels this year.
Sweet. That's exciting.
We might be able to jump on sometime mid-year after I put that away and something to chat about.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that we like to call that tease in the business. Good job, man. You should take our job.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it out there.
Oh, I like it. Second guess, right? So that's how you create a reoccurring thing. You create shock value in the podcast.
Hey, you gave us a reason to call him back. Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see.
You invited yourself back.
I like it.
Yeah. So, luckily enough, they did their very best when they were planning the new distillery, or just set up the distillery to run as much, product as they could. Luckily, the equipment is pretty darn. You got to intentionally break this equipment by whether it's by just not knowing what you're doing or not caring. Sometimes those are the same thing. When I took over the doubler itself, which is it's a reboiler, it's a thumper, it's something that cleans up. It's a second distillation in cleaning our spirits. That was crumbling. That was falling in. It was just like a Coke can, you twist and push down. That's what this thing was doing. That was already on order. They were rebuilding that. So that came in April of 22. When that happened, we pulled 2 of our large condensers, which condenses our vapor condenses our alcohol from a vapor to a liquid. Both of those were pulled off the top of the distillery and sent to Vendome to be retubed. We found many leaks. So there was a few things that had been patched over the years, needed to be repaired while we took some time to shut it down and fix that. So with a new doubler, 2 new condensers, and we put in some new tanks, some a little bit cleaner, more efficient, easier ways for us to clean things out, especially with our clean in place systems. The still itself is all stainless, so any part that's mash is coming in, it's all stainless. So and the date on that section is from 1954. Vendome 54-inch column. You have to try to break it. It's pretty reliable. The top section is all copper. It's our rectifying section. I believe it's 6 trays, mostly bubble cap trays there. So that part that's constantly keeping our heat up, keeping the right temperature, flavor, consistency. That's what we look out of that top section. Most distilleries will get 20, 25 years out of that section and have to swap it out because it will take quite a bit of abuse. And our cookers are stainless. I mean, all the fermenters are stainless. You really have to try to bust them. I don't have to deal with anything old and ferrous and rusty. And so we were able to kind of reevaluate what we had, bust a calculator out and really see what we could really squeeze out of the equipment. And we've been able to increase our efficiencies, increase our yield, slowly increase the barrel output, because we want to make sure that long term we're setting ourselves up for success for sure.
I'm mute over here because I was opening up a fresh bottle of the bourbon to talk about, but want to talk about the rye first, right? Because this is the most, we'll call it innovative release that you all put out of recent memory, right? The wheat came out last year, and there'll be more innovation, I'm sure. But the rye is a Kentucky 95.5, right? Like it's not a Kentucky style rye whiskey in a sense. It's barely rye. This is a traditional, like a Indiana style rye, right? 95.5. So talk a little bit about why that mash bill, and why you all kind of created Green River Rye Whiskey the way it is.
Yeah, there's that big stigma on 95 ryes, that you've either got that big company out of Lawrenceburg that produces an ungodly amount of that product, the rye that launched 1,000 ryes, that obviously there's some competition for somebody else that can make the 95.5 recipe, which it's the hardest recipe on the planet to make. I mean, it just really is. It's a very sticky mess. It doesn't yield the greatest, so you've got to sacrifice some of your time where you could be making a much more productive recipe. So you've got to sacrifice some time there to make that product. What we found was if we, cut back our recipes amounts just a little bit, we can move quite a bit of that product through and not sacrifice too much time. So we've got it down pretty well. Another thing we saw, we tested that product at several proofs, probably 10 finished proofs. And right there at that 95 is where we really loved the flavor just really shined there. You don't get that huge, strong dill and that earthy green flavor. For me, it's much more fruitier note, which is very surprising for a 95.5. I've had many 95.5s, and it's not an everyday drink for me, but I think it's a wonderful cocktail, whether it's neat or it's mixed into your favorite drink. For me, it was very surprising, and it does not drink like a standard, especially a 95 rye.
Yeah. No,
I second that 100%.
Yeah.
And I'm totally on board. You said exactly what I wanted to hear.
Well, I read your notes.
Yeah.
Scott is
got my memo.
No, Scott's the anti, rye, like traditional rye whiskey guy. What I found really interesting is there's different types of orange or citrus in this whiskey, right? It's orange peel. There's like some sugaried orange, right? Like from like an orange candy. There's, like a honeyed orange or a honeysuckle, right? So you're getting different layers of that, like kind of citrusy note. But instead of getting like cinnamon and clove, I'm getting more nutmeg and chocolate, right? Like that's what threw me off. It's kind of like those orange chocolate candies that out of Louisville. I forget what they're called, but that's what this reminds me of. And it's really, really nice. I've gone back to this a couple times already. And I'm surprised at the layers of flavors and which layers of flavors I'm getting.
Yeah. And I think that's going to change each time you go back to it especially when you bottle it up and bring it back out. We just sampled it at the event we were just at, and I've tasted a lot of 95s. Ours is my favorite. Ours is my favorite for a lot of reasons. It's approachable. You want to tell somebody about it. You want to bring that to a tasting with your friends and say, I'm going to knock your socks off and you're not going to believe the price point.
So speaking of the price point, what is the price point on these? It's like $40.
MSRP $34.99. All three offerings.
That's nuts. And they're all right around what, 4+ years. I mean, they're not age stated, but they're
4 to 5. Yeah. 4 to 5 is what we like to say. Single barrels are closer to the 6-7 range.
You can buy both bourbons and the rye for $100 and have a hell of a tasting.
Yeah.
No kidding. Like that.
And you're not going to not drink it. You're not going to throw it away.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying it's a perfect opportunity to introduce somebody to whiskey, like American whiskey, because you can have, well, first of all, you knock out that it's a different distillery or, something crazy. It's all the same distillery. Are they all 95 proof?
No,
90 proof. So our blue label weeded is a 90 proof. Our black label, our shining star there is 90 proof. The 95 at 95 just kind of rolls off your tongue. And that's, we tried to put that aside while we were sitting there kind of proofing. And it was like, we know we wanted something to have a little more heat. And then it was like, 95 at 95 sounds good. But lo and behold, within a point of proof there, it was just really, really delicious, and it made sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, hell, for $100, if you want to host your own whiskey tasting for friends, do that. I mean, that's perfect because you can talk about grain influence, proof. I mean, it's all not 5 points. I mean, I'd challenge most people to try to figure out 5 points difference. But like same distillery, about the same age. So it's like, really, you're just talking about the grain at that point, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. And we do our best to make sure we store all of our Green River barrels on site at our sites in Owensboro.
Yeah. So quick question. What are the different mash bills that are available? Like, so obviously it's the 95.5 rye. Do you give out the mash bills for the wheated and the bourbon?
Yeah, 70. So it's 70, 21, 0, 9, for our rye, and then the mirrored mash bill for the wheat, which is just the 21% wheat. So just swap out flip the 21s there. Same mash bill.
Keep it
makes
simple.
Hell easy to run.
Yeah, it's just
Try to keep it simple for you, right?
Hey, they know I can't do any better. It's fine.
So, all joking aside, but like, so you've worked on a variety of different stills, right? You worked on the behemoth of Barton. You worked on something interesting at Watershed. Shout out Watershed, Lost Lantern, for doing a lot of cool stuff. It's where I got to try that whiskey for the first time.
Hell yeah.
And really good whiskey. And obviously the team like Rimpey and all them have a giant still, and they've been, they're now putting out their own liquid, right? You've worked on a variety of different things, from old to new to giant to small. You know, what are some of the characteristics you have kind of like, or not characters, what are the things you've learned from those experiences to be able to put them in your job today to help your team become the most efficient team they can be?
Oh my gosh. I mean, great question. But I mean, the biggest thing for me is I'm absolutely, I know I have, outkicked my coverage 10 times over. I mean, my smoke show of a wife, beautiful kids, wonderful job, great people to work with, above and below. And the best thing for me is an understanding of those distillation systems. And the best thing for me in the operations position is I understand the support departments, both upstream and downstream. And that's huge. Because, without juice getting in a barrel in most distilleries, especially if you're not bottling as part of your core revenue function, I mean, that's it. That's what we've got to focus on. In that Green River, we are doing that. So, first off, every single still, I don't care what anyone wants to say, they're all going to come off of a little bit different distillate. It's grain type, it's operator. There's always, some people can argue with me all they want. There's a bit of a craft between each distillery, even though it's an industrial production. But everything they do, especially from running pot stills to hybrid stills to the 36-inch columns, 54, 72, they're all going to produce a different flavor profile.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite ready for such an oily profile off the pot stills. That was something that kind of threw me for a loop. And I adjusted to it. And then I thought, okay, well, we're going to play into this. And that was kind of the way we kind of had to figure things out with pot stills that I had to figure out at Watershed. And I'm so grateful for my time there working with Greg Lehman and team there. I learned a ton. Not only about how to be a great manager, but being a great distiller as well.
Mm. Well, and that's really interesting, right? Because I think there'll be a time. This is me not posturing, but pontificating. That's the word I'm looking for. For
word of the day.
Word of the day. The future, right? Because sometimes what's old becomes new, right? And effectively, a lot of distilleries have a pot still in their midst. They just use it as a doubler. But like being able to make those cuts, make those things to make whiskey different, get a different experience, get the grain to do different things, right? Because you could cut something, but your other operators could cut it just slightly different, and you can get variation. So you can get batch variation. So I think that's what's cool. Is some of these distilleries may do something funky like that down the road. Is, hey, let's use our doubler and just run it as a pot one time and see what happens out of that one batch. I think that could be something cool and innovative that we don't know is happening. That's already happening in the industry.
Yeah.
It's wild to think about, but
yeah. It's 100% on how the doubler is built, if it's built to handle mash, or if it's built to distill on grain or off grain, how you figure that out.
For sure.
We actually have the doubler. One of the doublers we have that there's mothballed, but it's sitting in our warehouse. We believe it's one of the original doublers after we believe it was the second fire to Green River. It was most likely put in the late 30s. But it's an all riveted copper doubler, probably 500 gallons.
Oh wow!
I definitely want to incorporate that somewhere in the system at some point. Is a big part of heritage and growth in the distillery, as well as something a visual ornament on the tour for sure.
Yeah, one thing that people don't know about is the really unique rick houses that you all have there. Now you've created new ones, modernized rick houses for the nth amount of production you all have been able to scale to. But can you talk a little bit about the historic rick houses on site and how they're just kind of different? They're visually beautiful, but how they're different than like a modern rick house that most people think of.
Yeah, I think a big play on it is, the founder of Green River was J.W. McCulloch, and one of his biggest pushes was he wanted all of his barrels on one floor, one long house, only on 3 ricks, and that was kind of what he thought. And then he had windows at every single rick, so he could get airflow in just one long window. And if you've ever seen, kind of similar to there are so few rick houses over in front of Glenmore Distillery, those are kind of similar to what they would have been. But they would have been much shorter and longer. So what that has grown to is sometime in the 30s, after the second fire here at Green River, there were new brick warehouses built. These were they look like brick, but they're more of a tile. So it's got three air pockets in each tile that are very unique to that building. There's 6 buildings on site now that still have that clay tile. Great insulators. I don't know what time of year you spend on site, but if it's 95 outside and you go into that rick house, it's like you walked into a walk-in cooler.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
What that does for us, it creates an ongoing maturation install phase for us. Obviously the outside higher elevated barrels are going to get a little bit more maturation, but we really create this kind of a stall zone that we have in the middle of our some of these rick houses, and we really need those 17, 18 freeze and thaw points that we have here in Kentucky that makes the greatest bourbon on the planet. So these rick houses are a little bit different. There's only 4 stories, and you're getting approximately 20,000 barrels out of each one of those warehouses. So we can somewhere around 120,000 barrels we'll store on site. At one time, there were 3, 4, 5, maybe bigger rick houses, because just north of where Green River is seated was the old Fleischmann's distillery as well. So that at one time, I believe that whole facility complex was one facility.
Yeah. And I think that's the real interesting thing is like when you get to Green River, it's in the back of a neighborhood. Like you literally turn off, like there's houses not too far in front of it. Like it's like you make a right turn and then you go down, you make a left turn, and there's the distillery like in a neighborhood, which is really interesting to me. Now, does the distillery actually back up to the river, or is there like a gap between the property and the water? I can't remember.
So we have we're very, very close to the river. We have a creek that's pretty deep. Borders our northern border of the property. We have a little piece of ground on the other side, but it basically empties into the river, and it's all heavily wooded. So we don't really have a dock on the river or anything like that. So, but our outfalls go directly to the river there.
Yeah. Well, and that's you think about the history, right, of Owensboro, and why Owensboro would have been like a mecca for distillation is because it was on the highway at that time, which was the river. It could get anywhere relatively quickly. And a lot of that was going to New Orleans or Louisiana at the time. So it's kind of cool just to kind of think about history and how people position distilleries, back in the day to now, and where you could literally put a distillery anywhere because of the train system or trucking or anything like that. Transportation is nuts better.
Yeah, and we're spoiled too, being right on the river. That you can, and like you said, it's a whole different feel when you're driving up. You're like, oh, what the hell? This is here, and you can clearly tell that was there before anything else.
Yep.
In the area.
Yeah.
Well, I think the cool thing about Green River is that you guys like embrace the history, but then you're also trying to be like a more modern distillery. Like there are elements that are very historic, and then there are elements that, like you said, we're trying to improve the equipment to make it more efficient, to make it, fit with current modern day distillation. So it's like you're getting a little bit of both, the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't really abide by the slap, lipstick on a pig. We're going to make sure that that's I don't know, make sure it's RoboCop underneath of that, clown costume. We want to make sure that, yes, we want to give a good show. We want to make sure that obviously the site is appealing, but make no mistake, we are a very industrial facility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a whiskey production. Like there's nothing like beautiful to a whiskey nerd, right? Seeing all of it is beautiful, but beautiful from a tourism perspective, the property in the hall that you can go and shop and see all the different stuff. That's nice. But like the production, you can see it is about making whiskey there. Like no ifs, ands, or buts.
Yep. We have a very firm understanding of what pays the bills.
Smart man. And I'm sure Mark Irwin really appreciates the fact that you and him have the same vision for that.
Yes.
Well, I know I was late to this podcast, so I know you got to run here at the top of the hour. But the last question I kind of have for you as we kind of round up the night is, what do you think the future holds? Like you talked about, some cool projects you may be doing, but like, what do you think the future of Green River is?
I think the future of Green River is, what I see is that we become the most notarized everyday pour that there is in the industry. We will take over the next century and beyond on what is an everyday pour, what is the most approachable bourbon, what can I go and have a good time with my friends and not get charged a fortune for, and what can I rely on? What can I rely on will be a great pour every time, and that's not going to disappoint me.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see first before you get to kind of do some of the playful things, and that's not really our brand. But at the same time, we want to be counted on. We want to be that steadfast, I know what I'm going to get every time. It's going to be fantastic pour, because that's where I want our foundation to be. Now, there's all kinds of opportunity. It's low-hanging fruit left and right everywhere, and we have an extreme desire and drive to grab market share from anyone in our way, anyone in our shelf space. We're ready to grab all that market share.
I love it.
Let's go sell some whiskey.
Yeah,
Damn.
no kidding. Hey,
that's what I'm here for, bro.
Hey, hey, let's put our hand.
I appreciate that, because it seems like a lot of distilleries are going the opposite way, right? It's how high can we drive this price? And you guys are like, our first whiskey comes out at $35. The next one, $35. The next one, which was the single barrels, like $60. Then you put out this rye and it's like, it's $35. Guess what? Here it is. So it's like, go buy yourself a bottle, because most people are going the other way and they're like, here's your new $150 bottle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And we're always trying to market. We always want to market responsibly, grab new customers, but we want to do it the right way, and we want to keep those customers. So that's a big part of my job, to make sure that we're not only attracting new, keeping faithful, and then doing it the right way. And for me, in my position, keeping talent on site is just as important.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, it's a whiskey without regrets for a reason. And it was once coined the whiskey without headaches. So we'll put that to the challenge tomorrow morning. When I wake up, I'll let you know. But
we'll report back.
We'll report back. But no, man, Aaron, I appreciate you hanging out with us. Have a great St. Patrick's Day. Enjoy Chicago. Turn that river green, and may the Green River be flowing evermore during this weekend ahead.
That.
Yeah,
absolutely, guys. I look forward to talking again.
I appreciate you, man. Have a great evening.
It.
You too. Thank you.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Make sure you're connected with Scott and I via social media on Instagram, X, and Facebook. We'd love to connect. And if you're more the professional type, follow us over on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter, The Weekly Pour. For exclusive content and more, check out Patreon. Follow us there at Bourbon Lens. And last but not least, on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you're subscribed, because every Monday, Scott and I release a podcast, and we would love to have you here listening to the newest features and the newest whiskey news. And until next time, cheers.